So at this point, it's been about 2 months since I last made a proper podcast episode, and it's wild to think about. So I'm so glad I finally have the time to sit down and bring you up to speed with my current projects and some finished objects from December. This is also going to be our first podcast episode of 2026, which is super exciting. We're kind of starting a new season here, so welcome. Please grab a drink, grab your knitting or crafting project, and let's get started. And as always, if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing so you don't miss my future videos. Before I get into my finished objects, I first of all wanted to apologize for being away from this channel for so long. It truly wasn't what I intended, but after being so overworked during the holiday season, I needed to take some time to recover. We have also been dealing with really inconvenient rolling blackouts here in Lviv and in Ukraine in general, and it's been really challenging to try and get through everyday life without, electricity. But of course, my knitting has been keeping me going, keeping me warm, and also keeping me sane through this period. So I'm super grateful for that. I think it was in one of my spring videos where I said I wanted to try and make 2025 my year of banger knits. And I feel like this project I'm about to show you is the quintessential banger knit. I'm so happy with how this one came out. I feel like it's one of my favorite projects of the year. And I'm of course talking about my finished Rosie Sweater. I love it. I cast this one on in September and it took me quite a while to get through. I finished it right before Christmas and I was able to wear it both on Christmas Day and on New Year's Eve. This black and white sparkly color scheme makes me think of classic cinema, silent movies, maybe just black and white movies in general. And I feel really chic when I wear it. Technically, it's not a Christmas sweater, but I feel like this slight metallic sparkle in the main color makes it really festive. In the end, I'm really happy with all of the modifications and changes I've made to the original Rosie pattern to make my own version. But of course, my favorite thing about this knit is the way I modified the colorwork motif. When the Rosie sweater pattern was first released in August, it started to gain a lot of traction really quickly. And I liked the design, but I initially didn't think I would cast this one on because I didn't have anything in stash that would work with this pattern. I don't know why, but I was convinced that I needed a light main color, but I didn't have, again, anything in stash that would suit it in terms of quantity. Then I just randomly thought about inverting it and took some Knitting for Olive Merino, which I had in black for the LZ slipover, which I ended up not making because I liked my swatch with the dark main color and white flower for the Rosie sweater so much, and I ended up casting it on that same day. And of course, at the beginning I was mostly working just in the main color to do all of the shoulder shaping and the contiguous sleeves, and then I was really focused on getting through the first rose motif. And when I got to the end of it, I was really relieved to start working in stockinette again, at least until I finally looked at the pattern pictures and saw that this gap is really bothering me. So in the end, I ended up really modifying the placement of the colorwork motif. And of course, I also mirrored the second rose and came up with this swirl in the middle just to kind of divide the two without having this gap of, just stockinette. So basically I did exactly what the pattern says until I was finished with the first rows. Then I knit 4 rounds of just the main color and then 3 rounds of this swirl motif, which I will include somewhere on the screen. It's super simple. I was just doodling in Stitch Fiddle until I came up with something that suited the pattern, in my opinion. And after the swirl motif was over, I knit another 4 rounds of just the main color and continued with the second rows, but I mirrored it vertically. It's really easy to do in Stitch Fiddle because you can really line it up like stitch by stitch. Basically, the reason you need to make sure that the original rose direction and the mirrored one are aligned is because if you don't do that, you might end up with kind of 2 roses, one after another, which looks really unbalanced. You need to make sure that after a rose, you have the leaf motif and, vice versa. Another modification I've made for my version is, of course, the folded collar with a double knit edge, which I've knit instead of the mock neck proposed in the pattern, and I mostly did it because I had no other choice. The mock neck turned out to be really wide and I decided to rework it into the folded collar, and I went into detail on how I've knit the double knit edge on this neckline in the last episode where I discussed this project as a whip, so please check out that one if you're interested. And just to recap, I was using 4.5mm needles for this whole sweater. I didn't change my needle size for the color work. I basically accidentally grabbed 4.5 and started knitting with this needle size, only then realizing that I have to start with 4mm and 4.5 is optional increase for just the color work. My gauge was just 1 stitch larger compared to the original pattern. The pattern itself has 21 stitches in 10 centimeters and I had 20. I was knitting the first size in the size range and I expected it to be much more oversized than it turned out to be. It actually turned out perfect. I have 18 centimeters of positive ease in this sweater and I just love how it fits me. It's not too cropped, not too wide, not too oversized. It's just right. So I'm really glad that my initial mistake and gauge issues actually worked out in my favor. Even though this finished Rosie sweater might be one of my favorite things I've ever made, the actual process of knitting this was not enjoyable and it took me a really long time to get through the color work charts. This rose motif is not intuitive, it's not repetitive, it's not symmetrical. You always need to keep track of where you are in the color work chart, and I've made a couple of mistakes which I then had to go back and reknit. It wasn't like drastic, but still it was really annoying, and the most annoying part was my yarns tangling. I used 3 strands held together for each of my colors, and for the main color it was Knitting for Olive with Lana Gatto, Silk Mohair and Kid Royal from Alize, and for my contrast color it was the same combo of Silk Mohairs but with Retrosaria Mondim as the fingering wool yarn. I'm really pleased with this combo in the finished object, but because it was so fluffy, it meant that my yarns were always trying to grip into themselves and they were really tangling, mostly because I'm also doing color work incorrectly, as I was told by a couple of my viewers with like the best intentions. They basically informed me that it's not supposed to tangle like that, which was a revelation for me. I thought it happened to everyone, but apparently not if you're kind of taking into account the color dominance and not always picking the yarns from under or like picking the floats from under themselves. I really think I need to relearn in the future to not have this happen, because at some points it was so tangled that I had to just rip out the yarns and splice them back together. I didn't want to finish the sleeves first because I felt like I would lose motivation, so I knit all of the color work on one sleeve, then on the body, and then I kind of treated myself with a small circumference on the other sleeve. And when I finished it, I really took a moment to take a deep breath and, remind myself that I don't have to knit this stupid rose motif ever again. But I think you can imagine how satisfying it was to start working on the stockinette sections, and I feel like I flew through this in just a couple of days. And as I said, it's one of my favorite knits of the year, if not of all time, so I'm really glad to have this one finished. And now I'm afraid I'm out of daylight, so I'll have to see you tomorrow after a break, which will for you only take a second. Okay, I'm back with extra poofy hair today, and let's continue. The next finished object I would like to talk about is my finished heather sweater. And of course, it's not really my heather sweater because I knit this for my boyfriend, and it's actually the reason why I can't show it to you on camera. I just don't have it with me, but of course I will include some b-roll. And this has been a very successful finished object because my boyfriend has been wearing it almost daily since I finished it in late December, and it just makes me so happy to see him wear it. And he also told me the other day that this sweater made him kind of reconsider the fit and how comfortable his hoodies and sweatshirts and store-bought sweaters are, because it's just not the same. And it made me feel a little bit guilty for not knitting him a sweater like this sooner and for stalling with this particular project for so long, because I see how much he loves it, and he is of course the most knit-worthy person in my life. I bought the yarn I ended up using for this sweater back in 2024, so a long time ago, and I intended to make the Mobi sweater with it, but this pattern and me kind of didn't connect. I ended up frogging it right after I finished the front and back and like joined it in the round. I first of all didn't like the cable motif. It was really tedious for me. I couldn't get into like the flow of knitting it, and also there were some fit issues, so I frogged my progress and decided to find a different pattern. I obviously went for the Heather sweater instead, and this is without a doubt my favorite project of the year. Of course, it's not as elaborate as my Rosie sweater or the Luise sweater I've knit at the beginning of the year, but I just love it so much. I've knit this in Alize Wooltime, which is a Turkish DK weight sock yarn, and it's quite, nice quality for the price. It's super affordable, which is why I bought it at the time. I couldn't honestly afford anything else, and I needed quite a large quantity for the sweater of my boyfriend's size. I think the size he usually goes for is like 2XL, so I just kind of had to make do with the budget I have, and I'm, quite happy with this yarn. I'm not sure how it will hold up over time, but so far so good. It doesn't really pill any more than like more high quality yarns I have, so I think it's going to be pretty durable. Another reason I went for sock yarn besides my budget at the time was because I wanted this sweater to be easy to take care of. I didn't want my boyfriend to have to like summon me every time he wants to wash it, so I can like block it and make sure it doesn't felt or like stretch out or anything like that, because of course sock yarn can be just like really carefully, but still can be tossed in a washing machine. And as I mentioned pretty much every time I talked about this project before, I am really embarrassed about how long it took me to make this. There was no reason for me to stall for so long and have it become a UFO, because I don't like to have UFOs. I have some sewing UFOs, but it's mostly because I don't have that much time to sew, and sewing is this like whole endeavor where I have to take my sewing machine out and like cut fabric on the floor and stuff like that. But with knitting, there is nothing stopping me from just working on my projects regularly. I try to make sure that I don't have too many whips going on at the same time. So I cast on this sweater in March of last year, so almost a year ago, and I worked on it pretty regularly during spring, but then I got really sick of it because of course it's much larger than the sizes I usually knit for myself, and I just had more stitches and like a larger circumference to go through, and I finished one of the sleeves. At that point, I had to do, of course, the other sleeve and a slog of stitches on the body. I put it aside with a very lame excuse that it's summer, and of course, my boyfriend couldn't wear it in the summer, so there's no need for me to finish it until at least fall, so I kind of let it hibernate. Then when I came back to it, I realized that I have no notes regarding how I knit the sleeve and the decreases I made. But let me tell you a little secret. I could have easily figured it out just by looking at the stitches, because the stitch pattern here is really easy to kind of read and figure out what I did and where the decreases are. I was just lazy. I was just procrastinating working on it because it was quite heavy and I had a lot of more exciting projects on my needles at the time, which like I always do. I finally picked it up again in December with the intention to finish it until the year is over, no matter what, and I did it. And I'm very proud of myself, and it was 950 grams of yarn out of my stash, and I just felt such immense relief at finally finishing this project. But then it was really stressful when I went to block it, because when my boyfriend tried on the sweater for the first time before it was blocked, it was fitting him quite nicely already, and I was just afraid of losing this nice fit after blocking, and I started to really regret my yarn choice. Of course, sock yarn tends to really stretch with blocking, and you have to be really careful to not like twist it too much. I ended up taking some measurements of what I would like the finished dimensions and fit to be, and I blocked it like I would a lace project really accurately with pins. It thankfully worked out and the fit is perfect. I don't think you can use the word tailored when it comes to slouchy and drop shoulder garments, but it does look tailored. It looks like it was specifically made for him, which yeah, it was, but you know what I mean. Like the length of the sleeves is perfect, the length of the body is perfect, the ease is just beautifully balanced between being slouchy but not like too draggy and oversized. So to make the pattern fit him, I changed my needle size from the intended 4mm and like the intended gauge to 4.5mm, and of course my gauge ended up being larger. I've knit the last size in the range, so like the largest size, and this sweater has about 25 centimeters of ease on him. His bust is 113 centimeters, and yeah, I love everything about it except the fact that it took me a year to knit this, and I really, as I said, want to knit more sweaters for him, and he specifically kind of suggestively sent me a reel about a Guernsey sweater that he found on Instagram, and maybe I will make him a Guernsey sweater later on, and of course more accessories for him. Like anything he wants I will make for him, because just seeing him wear my knits makes me really happy. The next finished object I'd like to show you is also a gift knit, and this was a project I worked on in January. It was a really quick knit and I enjoyed it very much. This is my Luise scarf. It's a free pattern from Lamana, and the yarn I used is also from Lamana, which has been really generously sent to me, along with a sweater quantity, which I will talk about later, and some other yarns from their selection. And this Roma yarn, as I talked in my last video, is the one I was impressed with the most. This is by far the most soft and airy, cloudy, luxurious yarn I've ever worked with, and of course it will not work for every project. Also, it's really hard to frog, so once you start knitting with it, you're kind of committed, but I think it will be perfect for a really special gift or a special small accessory knit, and this is what I did in this case with this Luise scarf, which is written specifically for this yarn and for just one ball of it. And there is 20 grams and 160 meters in one ball, which should be enough for this scarf, and mine is a little bit different when it comes to gauge because I've knit this on a smaller needle. I went down to 3mm needles instead of the 4mm recommended in the pattern, and it's a little bit smaller and kind of tighter than the original design, but I love it, and it's going to be a gift for a very special person who doesn't know that I'm going to gift them a knit, and I'm just really excited to finally show it to you on the podcast so I can finally package it and gift it. And this is just a stockinette scarf with a really simple and pretty lace motif, which is easy to knit, easy to memorize, so it was, you know, a really relaxing project to work on, especially since this yarn is very soft. And my boyfriend is really bummed out that I have knit this yarn into something, because he liked it so much that he was like, if you don't have a project for it in mind, just give it to me and I will just use it as my emotional support soft ball of yarn. But you know, it's not going to happen. This is going to be gifted away, and not much to say about the pattern, but I enjoyed it. It's really easy to customize if you want to use different yarn or a larger or smaller quantity of yarn. The lace motif on this scarf is really easy to block out because it forms this kind of wave on its own, and you don't have to pin it out too much. So I ended up not pinning it at all on this side, and instead I focused on untwisting or unrolling this stockinette edge, and it's not supposed to curl if you follow the pattern's directions. It was entirely my mistake because I decided to instead do a garter border and not the DK border as instructed in the pattern, and it ended up just folding on itself, which is kind of, I think, what it's supposed to do, but I didn't realize it at the time. It's not really visible in the finished scarf, especially when you just tie it around your neck, so I don't think it's going to be an issue, but I will remember it for next time, because this pattern has the potential to be reknit again and again because it's so easy to customize to your quantity of yarn, and it's really simple, really relaxing to knit, and yeah, I really like it and can't wait to gift it. And my last finished object for today is something I didn't expect to enjoy as much as I did, and I just flew through this project in a couple of days, and these are my Alma Mittens. I love them, and this is the type of color work I absolutely live for. It's the complete opposite of the Rosie motif, which, you know, the only fun thing about it was that it was over at some point, and here it's just so rhythmic, so symmetrical, so easy to memorize. I think I memorized it around here and then only referred to the pattern when I started to do the decreases and of course the thumb, but otherwise it's basically just this one little square repeated, a bunch of times in different directions. And of course, on the other side is just alternating the main and contrast color every stitch. And if I had to be really nitpicky about this pattern, I would say that it kind of has too much going on here on the palm side, because of course here it's, as I said, just alternating the main and the contrast color every stitch. And here you have this stripe, and here the stripe is broken up. So it kind of looks like a sampler. And the reason I went for the Alma pattern is mostly because I have very small hands. They're like T-Rex kind of small, and I have a lot of issues trying to find gloves or mittens or rings, bracelets that fit me and not just fall off. So most colorwork patterns for mittens, especially the Latvian mittens, are already knit on quite a small gauge and with a small needle size, for example 2mm or 2.25mm, and there's no way for me to just change the needle size to make them smaller. And these ones, the Alma mittens, are actually intended for Letlopi and 3.5mm needles, which meant I could just keep the original colorwork motif and went down in my needle size to 3mm needles and used much thinner yarn than Letlopi. My only concern when it comes to the fit of these mittens is maybe that I've made the ribbing too short in this, section, but if I pull it down like this, it's fine and it fits me quite well, so maybe it's for the best. And also, this was my first time doing corrugated ribbing and I didn't enjoy it. Of course, it's not as fun to knit as regular ribbing or really rhythmic, symmetrical color work, but I survived, it's fine. And I've knit this using Lamana Como. I've knit this using 2 Lamana yarns, which were also sent to me, and for my darker cherry color I used this Lamana Como, and for my lighter gray color I've used Lamana Como Cashmere. And these yarns are really similar, but this one has a little bit of cashmere in the blend. To be honest, they're so soft and bloom so much after blocking that I would have guessed that they're both cashmere. Because I've worn these mittens pretty much daily ever since I made them and blocked them, I can notice that they are pilling already a little bit, and I decided not to depill it just so I can show you accurately how much like floof and pilling there is on these. But to me it feels more like blooming and not pilling, so I'm still pretty happy with them. And this yarn is really soft. It's also really light because these balls are both 25-gram balls, and as you can see I have a lot left over. I'm gonna put the total quantity I used somewhere on the screen, and for something that weighs like 40 grams max, this has been keeping me really warm and kept my hands from falling off in this super unexpectedly freezing weather. We had like -15, -18 Celsius a couple of days ago, and it was miserable, especially again with the electricity being turned off every once in a while, like every day. But anyway, these has been keeping me very warm. I love them. And now let's move on to my works in progress, which I love all of these. I currently have 2 sweaters on my needles, and one of them is a cardigan. It's my second Lovisa cardigan. You've heard me rave about this pattern and the finished object in one of my fall episodes, and I just couldn't resist casting on another one. As you can see, I've made quite a bit of progress on this one already, and I also decided to time how long it takes me to knit a simple stockinette sweater, or in this case a cardigan, and so far I have spent 13 hours knitting this, and 6 out of those 13 hours were spent rewatching Pride and Prejudice, and I love it. I love it so much that once it was finished, I just went back to the first episode and started watching it again, and no regrets. The only bad thing about it is that when I watch shows or movies like this with a very refined British accent or super elaborate dialogue, it ends up messing my own accent for a while. I pick up a lot of this unnecessarily fancy vocabulary, and I had to really snap out of it when I write emails at work, because I've been a lot more polite and well-spoken than usual. But anyway, going back to the cardigan, this version would be a lot different from my first version because first of all I'm knitting it in a darker color, and I've also intentionally increased my gauge a little bit to have it be more slouchy and kind of soft and oversized compared to my first version, which is quite slim fitting around my shoulders, and in general it has less positive ease. And for this one I want it to be a more cozy cardigan. Also, I'm using a different yarn combo because my first one was not fluffy, it didn't have any silk mohair, but for this one, I'm using a very special silk mohair. But first, a really quick backstory. So I had this Loch Lomond from BC Garn for almost a year now. Some of it was gifted to me by a friend, and other skeins I kind of bought myself to have a full sweater quantity. I've started knitting the Puro Cardigan Light from Rui Yamamuro in the summer, and I frogged it not because there was anything wrong with the project, but because I got sick and this project started to remind me of the time I was really sick. So I decided to frog it and come back to a similar cardigan or maybe the same pattern, but at a later date. And I was kind of on a fence whether I want to use this yarn for a colorwork project or pair it with something or use it on its own, because this yarn is one of my favorites. It's really soft and lightweight when you use it in just one strand without adding anything else to it. But it turned out to be really hard to find a silk mohair that will match this shade exactly, because most silk mohairs in blue are either too bright or too jewel toned and not this like almost true navy color. So I went to pretty much every yarn store in my area to compare this color with the blue colors available, and nothing worked. Then I decided to risk it and order a blue silk mohair that I thought would match really well. And also I was really excited about it because it's Isager silk mohair, and I'm so happy that the risk paid off. So I ordered one ball originally, but then went back and ordered 4 more to have a sweater quantity. It's the best silk mohair I've ever used. It's so soft and fluffy, and it paired with this tweed and this specific color so beautifully. And my gauge on 5mm needles ended up being 17 stitches, which was really close to the Lovisa Cardigan, which has 18 stitches in 10 centimeters. I decided not to overthink it and just cast on another Lovisa Cardigan, and I'm really happy I did. I love this project so much, and I know it's going to be even softer once I block it. I'm really curious to see how much time in total it will take me, but mostly I'm just enjoying working with this combo of yarns. They're so buttery together, and I consider this sweater quantity to be kind of my gift from myself to myself, because I'm not usually the one to splurge on yarns like this, but I'm really confident that it will work exactly as I imagine. I've also talked about this pattern before. It's really well written, super easy to follow, and the shoulder and like sleeve cap shaping is really unique and really well fitting, so I highly recommend it. Unfortunately, it's not something I can say about this next pattern I'm knitting, which is the Upstream Sweater from the Rose knitwear book. I don't want to use the word hate because it's a really strong word to use about a knitting pattern, but I highly dislike the way it is written, the decisions and like shaping choices that went into this pattern. And even though I love this design and I wanted to knit this for a while, once I started actually making this pattern and reading through the instructions, I got a migraine. Like, I'm not kidding, because it's so confusingly written. Perhaps I got way too cozy with the Petiteknit writing style, but I don't know. I've knit patterns from books before. I've read through like vintage patterns before, and I've never seen an issue like this. It's just very strangely formatted. And for example, the raglan chart is on a completely different page, and the chart for the stitch pattern itself is like 30 pages before the pattern, and I don't like the way it's written. And I loved this design for a while, like ever since it came out. I think even before it came out, I just saved it on Instagram or like on Ravelry, everywhere I could, so I don't forget about this beautiful pattern. But then I bought the book with my first YouTube paycheck. It was like a gift to myself, and I was finally ready to make the pattern because I had the quantity of yarn I can use for this, and I was really disappointed. I think part of it is because I started to knit this on a Monday evening after a really stressful work day. I was just not able to relax or like wrap my head around what is required from me to cast this on and start knitting it. But I am determined to have this project finished, and I am almost past the point where I need to split for body and sleeves. And because this pattern is so confusingly written, I had to make a choice to make it reversible and just to skip shaping altogether. And above all else, my least favorite thing about this pattern is the way the shirt rows for the back of the neck are constructed and written. And I've spent quite a long time browsing through projects of people who knit this sweater on Ravelry and reading through the feedback and different, issues people had with the pattern. I've looked at a couple of pictures where the shaping is complete as per pattern's instructions, which are again super confusing. And in the end, these shirt rows don't really raise the back of the neck as much as I would like, for example. So I made a decision to skip them, and I'm not really referring to the pattern anymore. I just closed the tab I had with this book. I will probably open it again only to see how many stitches I need to cast on for the underarms once I split for body and sleeves, but otherwise I'm just following the beautiful stitch pattern it has, but not really referring to the pattern anymore. But my feedback regarding the yarn and color and just in general how this project is coming out is the complete opposite of my feelings towards the pattern. And I'm also using Lamana yarns for this. This is the sweater quantity I was talking about. Again, I was sent this yarn. I honestly could not have afforded it on my own, and this is Lamana Como Grande. This is 100% merino, but it feels like cashmere and it blooms after blocking like cashmere, and I'm afraid it's gonna pill just a tiny bit, but otherwise it's really soft and a lot more lightweight than other worsted weight yarns I've tried before. So I'm really excited to see how it's gonna come out, this self-drafted at this point project. My only concern is that I feel I might end up with a crumb catcher right here because I skipped the short row shaping, but hopefully it will not happen. I have nothing against the designer personally. Rose Knitwear has beautiful designs and such unique stitch patterns and constructions involved in them, but I just didn't vibe with this pattern, and I have to be honest. All right, so I don't have a lot of time left before I'm out of daylight again, so I'll try to be as quick as possible, but still thorough about the last work in progress I want to show you. So when I'm researching for my roundups, I oftentimes see beautiful Japanese designs, which are unfortunately not available anywhere through Ravelry or just for online purchase. They're mostly in magazines or knitting books that are only available in Japanese, sometimes in one size, but some of these patterns are breathtakingly beautiful, especially when it comes to intarsia, color work, or cables. The only way I was able to find some of them in digital form is through Etsy, which is unfortunate because I hate the current state of Etsy with a passion. When it comes to knitting and sewing and crochet as well, it is full of stolen designs and AI regurgitated instructions, and it's just not a place I want to support. But I have really struggled to find these patterns anywhere else, and I have also contacted a couple of shops that sell these magazines and books in physical form to see if I can, for example, pay for the product and shipping, but receive a PDF file instead. And they told me that unfortunately they mostly can't do that because all of the material is copyrighted and it's not really how it works. So I was really bummed out about it and ended up buying a couple of these digitally scanned magazines off Etsy, which I'm not really proud of. And I'm actually really curious to know what are your thoughts on this. Perhaps you know some non-dubious places where I can find these magazines, especially when it comes to Daruma or Amirisu magazines without buying them from Etsy. So let me know. But anyway, I'm currently knitting one of my favorite sock projects of all time since I've started knitting. And these are my Smocking Socks from Amuhibi Knitbook 2. I love them. I don't have a second sock syndrome with these ones. I knit the first one and just straight away I started making the second one as well, and I'm pretty sure I will finish these this evening. And the only kind of slow going part of these socks is the cuff, which is really long, and it actually is a fold down cuff, and it took me quite a long time to knit, but otherwise these smocks go so quickly and the sole is just stuck in it, so I'm just really enjoying it. And I'm using Mondim for this. I was able to buy some more Mondim, and one of the colors I picked up was this beautiful kind of mottled forest green, and of course it's not as vibrant as the green used in the original pattern sample, but I still really like it. And my problem with socks is that I usually don't want to do anything complicated with socks. I don't really enjoy knitting them most of the time. So I'm always planning something elaborate for my sock yarn, but end up making super simple stockinette socks with like a German short row heel. And these socks also have a German short row heel, and I do admit I tried to do a different heel. I tried to do this like slip stitch heel, which I found in the 52 Weeks of Socks book by Lane, but I frogged back because I realized it doesn't really suit this pattern and it would be just too much texture. So I went back to a German short row heel, which takes me like, I don't know, 40 minutes to do. It's something I think I can do with my eyes closed at this point, but my goal for this year is maybe not knit more socks than I usually do. I mostly knit like 2 pairs of socks a year, but every time I do knit socks, I want them to be more special and more complicated. I want to try different heel constructions, different patterns, and not just be stock knitting stockinette socks every time. So it's something I'm working on, and this pair is almost finished. The only modification I've made to the original pattern is the way I decreased at the toe, because the original design has this smock motif just abruptly stop before switching to a stockinette toe, but I wanted to carry it along with the decreases, and it's pretty easy. I think I will make a little chart and put it in the Ravelry page for these socks once I finish it, so you can recreate it if you somehow find a pattern for these socks and decide to do them, or maybe self-draft your own pair of smocked socks, which shouldn't be that complicated. And believe it or not, this pattern in Japanese is easier to follow and more easy to understand than the Upstream Sweater pattern, which is like saying something. So before it gets way too dark to film, I only want to show you one acquisition I have, and this is something that my friend gifted to me for New Year's. My friend, who I actually met through this YouTube channel, visited me for New Year's. We spent an amazing New Year's Eve together, and she gifted me a ball of Cardiff cashmere, which I'm really grateful for. I, of course, haven't used it before. I talked about it a lot in my roundups, and I kind of know what it is and how to knit with it and what the gauge is like and everything, but I haven't actually used it myself. So I have this one ball of this really beautiful chestnut brown color, and I'm pretty sure I'm gonna knit a pair of penny gloves with it, but maybe I will pick up another color to make a little scarf, or maybe a hat, or maybe I will pick up a lighter color and try to make it work for the songbird mittens, but I don't think the meterage will work out, so I'll have to think about it. For now, it's just sitting in my stash waiting its turn, and unfortunately I was not able to find this same colorway in some of our shops that sell Cardiff cashmere, so I can't like buy more and make a larger project just using this color, but I'll figure something out. In general, like before I go, I wanted to thank you again for being here, for watching my videos, for reaching out. I've met so many amazing, talented, just incredible people through this channel, and I have been, really welcomed into this community, which I really appreciate, and I hope to make more videos for you more frequently, but my job unfortunately prevents me from doing that currently. As always, if you like this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more. Let me know in the comments, what are you working on right now? Perhaps if you've knit the Upstream Sweater, let me know if I'm exaggerating or not. What are your feedback regarding this pattern? And if you'd like to support the channel, you can either share this video with a friend who you think might like it, or you can buy me a coffee through my PayPal, which is linked below, but it's absolutely not obligatory. You don't have to do that. Just watching this video is enough. Thank you for the millionth time for being here, and I wish you happy knitting and a wonderful day. Bye.